Welcome to the event today, and I'm representing Mela Nordic. So Mela Nordic is a progressive South Asian organization based in Malmö or in Sweden. So we are all kind of nationalities or ethnicities and religion within South Asia. So this is one of our first events in Stockholm. And today's topic, as you know, 70 years of partitioned voices. So that's and today our first session is with Bushra. Okay, so she can explain better actually, but I can take care of the slides. So you can start.
So can you change the slides, or
I can do it.
you can
Yeah, I can turn it. Yeah, no
turn
problem.
it around,
Okay.
then I can.
Sure. All right.
But if you turn it around, then the person on Zoom will not be able to see.
No, camera is here.
Oh, okay.
अच्छा तो इधर रख लें अगर आप इधर नहीं बैठे तो do you अच्छा इसके
Yeah.
साथ
Let me move.
हाँ,
Maybe.
चलिए ये ठीक है हाँ
Look.
चले सही है कहाँ है भाई स्लाइड विच बटन ये बटन नहीं
No, here. That's
अच्छा Okay, G. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on this very important, timely, and most needed event. I'm so glad to be here with you guys, and I'm not a scholar or a professor. I come as an artist, a Pakistani, a South Asian. And before I share my observations and experience through my art, I would like to share with you all how I look at India and Pakistan's relationship metaphorically. I think India is Pakistan's mother, like Pakistan came out of her womb. And, and then Pakistan married into a religious household, and how the in-laws, they don't get along, but their kids, citizen of India and Pakistan, they are friends. They play together, attend each other's events, and they are like good neighbors. And also, that is because of their shared history and their heritage and their culture. And also because they are the mutual victims of the politics of hatred. I argue that most of us don't want the politics to divide us. There is still space for love and humanity. Oh, in between, that was the slide. So India, so Pakistan is India's child in a way. And I grew up in Lahore in a Punjabi family. My childhood was spent in a house that once belonged to a Hindu. And I say that the word Om was written on the facade of the house. And as a kid, I looked at it, without realizing its significance or its meaning. It was just a mark of my home. And one of the earliest memories I have in this house is listening to Indian songs on radio. My mother used to put them on in the morning as we got ready for school, in the afternoon when we returned, and again at night before going to bed. Like my mother would tune into All India radio program, Aapki Farmaish, Aapki Pasand, Tamil Irshad. And these songs became the soundtrack of our lives. Today, my girls know all these old melodies, and I've, in a way, transferred that tradition, my mother's tradition, to them also. So not just radio, but TV, Doordarshan India TV also played a vital role in defining my personality. I knew more about Indian culture through movies and Chitrahar than my own. And I didn't know at that time many Pakistani songs unless I made a friend in college, and she was a great singer, and she introduced me to the Pakistani music, and that was great. Sadly, years later, when I went back to my old home, that Om was defaced, and that small symbol that held so much meaning and memories was not there, and that was very sad. It broke my heart. It was very sad to see that. And I thought about how by removing it from the wall, things written in our memories can be removed. Like those memories preserved in in history, in books, in stories by the writers who are praised on both sides. This is Kurutul and Heather, her magnum opus, Aag Ka Darya. Who would know about that? If you can't read Urdu, this is Aag Ka Darya. And then Chandni, her Chandni Begum. Then Ismat Chugtai, she's celebrated on both sides of the borders. Her stories are so well known, and her most famous Lihaf. And also then Fahmida Riaz, her poetry. It's so popular among women and the youth. So I moved to the US in 1990s, and I met many Indians and Bangladeshi, made friends with them. And it was like reconnecting and, meeting your long lost family or friends, sharing that deep love of poetry, of music, of songs. Mir and Ghalib, who wouldn't know about, Zikre Mir? That's in my, if you can't read, that's Mir's book. Then, Ghalib, Diwane Ghalib. So Mir Ghalib, commonly quoted in our colloquial language. I mean, people just know the verses without even knowing that they are from Mir or Ghalib. And then Sahir's, this is Sahir's work. So without knowing that who is the lyricist, many Indian Pakistani would just hum on the tune of Sahir's songs, without knowing that who wrote the song. So, and like as an artist, I'm so inspired by Amrita Shergill. Her soulful work was, I was so fascinated and touched by it, and I incorporated her work as well, because I could just feel her. I was like, connect with her work. So that's her painting up there, and I incorporated that in one of my paintings. And then one more. That's her, it went well with the. So when I'm painting, I'm not a Pakistani. I'm a woman of South Asia from the Indo-Pak subcontinent who owns and celebrates her culture, tradition, and heritage through her work. My subject matter is woman, which I believe exists in every gender. My paintings evoke emotion. They raise questions surrounding a woman in a patriarchal society. They challenge the traditional representation of women, showing them powerful, independent, and defiant. They confront life boldly with fierce confidence and strength. My work goes beyond the national boundaries of India and Pakistan, permitting women to own themselves completely and unapologetically. And it's always rewarding to hear from the audience who could really relate to my work. And most of them are Indians who would reach out. So that's very encouraging for me. And it also gives me a great joy when on 14th, 15th August, I want to paint something for the South Asia. And because it also gives me this opportunity to remove this divided line. So one very symbolic space is the Wagah border. Yeah, so this is a space, strange and overwhelmingly blend of rivalry and cooperation. And the love-hate relationship on both sides of that line inspired me to create this one. This piece challenges the division we are so accustomed to seeing. And seems my presentation is really short. So my final slide is Dupatta Badal Behne. Yeah. So scarf swapping sisters, which I painted last year after the Olympics. Both these, their son got the medal, silver and gold. Here the mothers are celebrating the success of their kids, of their two boys. And these mothers swap their dupattas in a gesture of sisterhood, a tradition shared in both the countries in that region. And here the dupattas are the flag of India and Pakistan. So this is an act. The mothers are not just embracing each other, they're also embracing and recognizing each other's sons, their nation, identity. And I would say these mothers exemplified the message of love and unity by rejecting this artificial divide imposed upon us for the last 75 years. And their love, their pride and maternal bond, it knows no boundaries or borders. So this image it resonated widely, and it was shared across the social media, both by Indians and Pakistanis, and who found something of themselves in it. It touched a nerve because deep down, we all know we are one. We crave connection, not conflict. No matter which side of the border we live in, we share the struggle to have our voice of unity be heard. And that's all for today. And thank you so much. I can sit here on the floor. That's okay.
And now we have Dr. Aamir Butt from England. He will present his work.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Thank you for inviting me. Just like Bushra, I am not an academic or a professor. I am actually a doctor of medicine. In fact, even in medicine, because I'm a dermatologist, they don't think I'm a real doctor because real doctors are the one making life and death decisions and not the dermatologists. But anyway, partition.
Just a second.
Dr. Butt, please wait for you to be pinned on the screen.
But why it's not coming there?
Dermatologist.
I think you have to get out of the slide. That's why.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you need to remove
The PowerPoint, yeah.
Eject.
There you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, now we can see you.
Okay, all right,
Please.
that's good. So, so partition and poetry has been a lifelong interest for me. And today I'm going to talk a bit about how Partition of India influenced Sahir Ludihanvi's poetry.
Oh.
And Sahir Ludihanvi was born as Abdul Hay in 1921 in Ludhiana, Punjab. And by the time he was 25, he was an celebrated poet of India. And his first collection of poetry had become a bestseller. And it remains so today, to this day, with over 30 editions. And it's never been out of print. Sahir was also an active member of Progressive Writers Association, PWA as it is called. And PWA is quite a unique historical movement in literature, where the leading writers and poets of India came together in the 30s. And their aim was to reform the Indian society completely on the basis of justice, equality, and freedom from dogma and freedom of exploitation. So for this, they thought that India should be first free from the colonial rule, and then the Indians can themselves recreate their society. But unfortunately, as an independence came, it does not come as one country. India was divided along religious lines into two countries. So that greatly affected all of the PWA members. And of course, Sahir Ludihanvi was one of them who was extremely traumatized by the whole tragedy of partition. And not only that, the extremely unbelievable violence that took place. So on the night between 14th and 15th of August 1947, at stroke of midnight, India became free as two countries. And at that time, Sahir was in Bombay. He went there to take part in a film project. And while outside in the streets, people were dancing and firecrackers were going on, Sahir was sitting in his flat. And he wrote a poem called Mufahimat, Compromise. And I will read a few lines from that for you. And he says, Jihad khatm hua, dore atshi aaya, संभल के बैठ गए महमलों में दीवाने, हजूम तशना लबों की निगाह से ओझल, छलक रहे हैं शराबे हवस के पैमाने. ये जश्न जश्न मुसर्रत नहीं तमाशा है, नए लिबास में निकला है रहजनी का जुलूस, हजार शम्मे अखुवत बुझा के चमके हैं, ये तेरगी के उभरे हुए हसी फानूस. I will translate it for you in English. Jihad has ended and time of peace has come. The wild ones are now sitting in marriage halls. Hidden from the eyes of those dying of thirst, wine of lust's goblets are overflowing. This is not a celebration of joy, it's a farce. In a new uniform has come the gang of robbers. After extinguishing 1,000 candles of love have glowed bright, these chandeliers of separate houses. Soon after the event, Sahir left Bombay and he was trying to make his way to Ludhiana, where his mother was. But when he got to Delhi, there was no way further because of the riots which had now completely engulfed Punjab. So he was stuck in Delhi. He was worried about his mother. He didn't know that she's already moved to Lahore. And at that time, he was invited to All India Radio Delhi, and obviously they asked him to recite his poetry. And here Sahir edited another poem, which was called Aaj, Today. And he starts, साथियों मैंने बरसों तुम्हारे लिए चांद तारों बहारों के सपने बुने, हुस्न और इश्क के गीत गाता रहा, आरजुओं के ऐवां सजाता रहा, मैं तुम्हारा मगन्नी तुम्हारे लिए, जब भी आया नए गीत लाता रहा. Friends, for many years I for you weaved dreams of moon, stars and the spring, sang songs of beauty and love, built palaces of hope. I, your songwriter, whenever I came to you, brought you new songs. And then he says, आज लेकिन मेरे दामने चाक में गर्दे राह सफर के सिवा कुछ नहीं, और नगमे की तकलीफ का साजो सामा साथियों आज तुमने बसम कर दिया है, और मैं अपना टूटा हुआ सांस थामे सर्द लाशों के अंबार को तक रहा हूँ. But today, in my torn pockets, I have nothing but the dust of my journey and the equipment needed to create songs. Friends, today you have burned to ashes, and I, holding my broken flute, am staring at the piles of cold dead bodies. And then he ends with an appeal to all those who were indulging in the violence, and he says, मुल्क की वादियाँ, घाटियाँ, खेतियाँ, औरतें, बच्चियाँ, हाथ फैलाए खैरात की मुंतज़िर हैं. The mountains, valleys and fields of this land, the women, the girls, with their hands spread, are begging you to have mercy on them. उनको अमन और तहजीब की भीख दो, माओं को उनके होंठों की शादाबियाँ, नन्हे बच्चों को उनकी खुशियाँ बख्श दो. Give them the arms of peace and civilization. Give back, mother, the smiles of their lips. Give back, children, their laughter. मुझको मेरा हुनर, मेरी लय बख्श दो. मुझको फिर मेरा खोया हुआ साज दो. मैं तुम्हारा मगन्नी तुम्हारे लिए जब भी आया नए गीत लाता रहूंगा. Give me back my talent and my tune. Give me my last flute again. I, your songwriter, will then bring new songs whenever I come. Sahir eventually did reach Lahore and he was reunited with his mother, but only a few months later, he moved back to India, settled in Bombay, and he never visited Lahore again. By the middle of 1950s, Sahir became one of the, well, in fact, the leading and the most highly paid lyric writer for Bombay film industry. This move from Sahir to become from a conventional poet to a lyric writer obviously had monetary reasons as well. But in addition, Sahir felt that his message of poetry did not reach the masses because many of them could not read poetry. And he thought that as a lyric writer, his message would have greater reach. Sahir, like other members of PWA, felt themselves partly responsible for all that happened because they had been preaching for unity, freedom of religious dogma, and all people of every religion together, and that did not happen. One of the most shocking practices that was seen during the violence of 1947 was the systemic rape and kidnapping of women by both sides. Manto, Sadasan Manto's stories, the most powerful ones, are based on this topic. Sahir himself was also greatly affected by that, and he wrote a poem, Aurat, which later on was used in Bombay movie as well. And I think this poem remains one of the handful of Urdu poems that speaks from the perspective of a rape victim. And I will read some lines for you. लोग औरत को फकत जिस्म समझ लेते हैं, रूह भी होती है उसमें ये कहाँ सोचते हैं. रूह मर जाती है तो जिस्म है चलती हुई लाश, इस हकीकत को समझते हैं न पहचानते हैं. Women are looked at as just bodies, that they have a soul, nobody cares. When soul is dead, she is just a walking dead. This reality they neither know nor accept. कितनी सदियों से ये वहशत का चलन जारी है, कितनी सदियों से है कायम ये गुनाहों का रिवाज. लोग औरत की हर एक चीख को नगमा समझे, वो कबीलों का ज़माना हो कि शहरों का रिवाज. For how many centuries is this savagery being practiced? For how many centuries this custom is in place? The screams of women were heard as music in tribal times or in modern times. The next few lines, I think, one of the most powerful in Urdu poetry, and he says, जबर से नस्ल बढ़े, जुल्म से तन मेल करें, ये अमल हम में है, बेइल्म परिंदों में नहीं. हम जो इंसानों की तहजीब लिए फिरते हैं, हम सब वहशी कोई जंगल के दरिंदों में नहीं. Brutality to breed, force to make bodies come together. This is done by us, not the ignorant birds. We who take pride in the human civilization. There is no animal as savage in the jungles as us. Am I okay for time or am I running a bit behind?
You can have more time, no problem. Yeah.
Okay. In another poem that I wrote about the partition events, Ye kiska lahu hai kaun mara, he addresses the leaders, both political leaders and religious leaders. And he points out that once blood is spilled, you cannot, by looking at the blood, tell who was it, Hindu, Muslim, or Sikh. And he emphasizes that people who suffered were from both sides more or less equally. And he says, ये जलते हुए घर किसके हैं, ये कटते हुए तन किसके हैं, तकसीम के अंधे तूफान में लुटते हुए गुलशन किसके हैं. Whose houses are on fire, whose bodies are being cut to pieces in this blind cyclone of partition, whose orchards are being destroyed. And he blamed the religious polarization, the division of people into different religions as the basis of this violence. And he says, जिस राम के नाम पे खून बहे उस राम की इज्जत क्या होगी, जिस दीन के हाथों लाज लुटे उस दीन की कीमत क्या होगी, इंसान की इस जिल्लत से परे शैतान की जिल्लत क्या होगी, ये वीद हटा कुरान उठा, ये किसका लहू है कौन मरा. The God whose name is used to spill blood, what good is that God? The religion that justifies rape, what worth is that religion? Compared to this depravity of man, what is the depravity of Satan? Take away the weeds, remove the Quran. Whose blood is this? Who died? Sahir spent rest of his life promoting religious harmony, humanity, and justice. And one of the most famous songs that he wrote for a movie called Dhool Ka Phool encapsulates his philosophy. And he says in that, मालिक ने हर इंसान को इंसान बनाया, हमने उसे हिंदू या मुसलमान बनाया, कुदरत ने तो बख्शी थी हमें एक ही धरती, हमने कहीं भारत कहीं ईरान बनाया. God made every human just a human. We made some Hindus and some Muslim. The Creator gave us just one earth. We made some place India and another Iran. I'm sure you would have used Pakistan instead of Iran, but the rhyming constraints of Urdu poetry will not allow that. In some ways, I think the partition never happened for Sahir, because all his work is addressed to all the people that would listen to him. He has not divided India's people post-partition into Indians or Pakistanis. So his message was quite universal in that way. And this is something that could be brought out by contrasting with some other poets. For example, Ali Sardar Jafri, another great poet and a great human, who again spent all his life trying to bring peace between India and Pakistan and writing poetry in that context. But if you listen to him, like I will just quote a few lines from his poem called Dosti Ka Haath, Hand of Friendship. And he says, Tumao Gulshane Lahore se chaman burdosh, हमाएं सुबह बनारस की रोशनी लेकर, हिमालय की फजाओं की ताजगी लेकर, फिर इसके बाद ये पूछेंगे कौन दुश्मन है. You come from the garden of Lahore with flowers. We come bringing the light of a Benares morning, bringing the freshness of Himalayan air. After that, we will ask who is the enemy. So great words, but you can see he's talking us and them, you and me. He is dividing the people into two hostile fractions. Sahir avoids that. He is not division of people, not that people divided between two countries. But obviously that doesn't mean he was not conscious of the ground reality, that there is a political and a geographic division. When Sahir left Lahore, he left some of his best friends. For example, Hamid Akhtar, another writer who was his childhood friend. And Hamid Akhtar actually was the chap who risked his life going to Ludhiana to evacuate Sahir's mother. So all these friends were left behind when Sahir moved to India, and he could not meet them after that. And this trauma and this pain of separation, Sahir has not put them in clear words. I mean, he's not mentioned them by name, but in his words, in his songs, you can see that it comes across. For example, in a 1954 film, Angare, and he's written a song that was vocalized by Lataji, and the song goes something like, मेरे आंसू मेरी आहें ले जा, साथ अपने मेरी बेताब निगाहें ले जा, उस बस्ती को जाने वाले, लेता जा पैगाम मेरा. Take my tears and my sighs with you, take my restless eyes with you, O traveler to that other land, take my message with you. एक तरफ दुनिया के सदमे, एक तरफ गम दूरी के, कौन सुने किसको समझाएं दुख अपनी मजबूरी के. मुमकिन हो तो ले जा अपने साथ दिले नाकाम मेरा, लेता जा पैगाम मेरा, उस बस्ती को जाने वाले. In one hand are the griefs of the world, and in the other the pain of separation. Who can we tell? Who will listen to the sadness of our plight? If possible, take my broken heart with you, take my message with you, O traveler to that other land. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Saab. And now we have Dr. Ludihanvi, and his topic, what he want to present is rethinking partition in the Gramscian perspective. Welcome.
Do I have to speak right from here?
You know, we'll come here, sit here. Yeah. I think you can close the camera now, so. Amar, you can close the camera, so it's, yeah.
How do I close it? Oh, not sure. Can't you switch me off from there, because I don't know either. There's no camera closing here.
It's fine.
Or maybe you can close the microphone for a while, so it's like. Yeah.
Mute your- mute.
Okay.
Oh, he's on his iPhone, that's fine. There we go. I don't think he's-
I'm sorry, I'm going to take few minutes, maybe less than few minutes, because it's sort of, I'm not privy to the technology that much really. So let me introduce myself, or should I? If it is required or not.
Please.
Basically, I am a urologist to begin with. And mostly I worked right from the beginning during my college days and later on Marxism. And I have been working and writing regularly and of course learning Marxism because that was the field I loved the most, more than medicine actually. So that's why I wrote recently, a couple of years ago, God's Republic, Making and Unmaking of Israel and Pakistan. And well, I have due criticism on that subject really. Though it was liked by Gideon Levy, and I was encouraged by Norman Finkelstein as well on that subject. So let's start with Gramsci, my favorite person really. Gramsci, to give a small introduction of Gramsci, he was Italian, Antonio Gramsci was Italian Marxist, and he was very active in Marxist activities. But what happened was that he was arrested no sooner Mussolini came into power. And once Mussolini decided to put him behind the bars for 20 years. And he died with tuberculosis and consumption and whatever you can call it. He died over there, not in prison, but in hospital. He was still imprisoned, in fact. So Gramsci's work is a multidimensional edition in Marxism. It's a cultural edition in Marxism. So Pakistan and especially India and Pakistan they suffer from Gramsci, actually. So it's like rethinking partition in colonial and post-colonial Pakistan, a Gramscian perspective. The tragedy of Pakistani society lies not merely in the repeated affliction, but in its failure to react meaningfully to them. As Shakespeare observed, when sorrow come, they come not in single spies, but in battalions. Yet Rosa Luxemburg reminds us, those who do not move do not feel their chains. In contrast to Palestinians, whose resistance affirmed their subjectivity and whose struggle for liberation is rooted in material conditions, as Marx alluded to, the people of Pakistan seem addicted to their chains, restless, yet directionless, or rather rudderless, embodying Dante's chilling warning, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. This paralysis of will echoes Max Horkheimer critic in The Eclipse of Reason, where he notes, men have been released from the concentration camps who have taken over the jargon of their jailers and with cold reason and mad consent, content that they have not been treated so badly after all. This airy normalization of subjugation resonates with the Pakistani condition, where survival, stripped of dignity, is misrecognized as destiny. As Brutus tells Caesar's in Julius Caesar's, the fault, dear Cassius, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. The tragedy did not end with colonial withdrawal, as Frantz Fanon warned. Colonialism leaves behind the germs of rot, which must be carefully weeded out. In Pakistan's case, these remnants included the landed aristocracy, the comprador bourgeoisie, classes shaped by and loyal to colonial hegemonic designs. In the immediate post-colonial period, power was consolidated into a Bonapartist, Caesarist bloc led by a civil military bureaucracy masquerading as a nation state. This analysis draws on Gramscian's key concepts: Caesarism, Bonapartism, cultural hegemony, passive revolution, war of position, and war of maneuver to reinterpret the trajectory of partition and its aftermath. Each historical phase reflects how the ruling bloc preserved its hegemony by leveraging these dynamics. Its number one is colonial India, hegemony through division and domination. Before British colonization, the Indian subcontinent was a loosely connected network of autonomous regions under variable central authority. The people were often alienated from or unaware of imperial authority. British colonialism introduced a centralized state devoid of consent without legitimacy. Instead, power was exercised through sheer outright coercion, not through hegemony. British rule relied heavily on divide and rule. From the Berlin Conference of 1884-85, where Africa was partitioned, to the sectarian division in Ireland, India, and in the Arab world, especially Palestine, colonial powers manufactured difference to prevent unity. In India, this led to a long war of position, punctuated by few, but notably few frontal attacks as well. In the 1857 rebellion, considered India's first war of independence, was a rare moment of counter-hegemonic unity among Hindus and Muslims. Yet, the movement was ultimately defeated due to rebels' lack of military experience, strategic leadership, and the decayed central power in Delhi. As Ingalls noted, the people were deliberately denied the experience needed to command and lead. Later, Bhagat Singh and his comrades articulated a more mature political consciousness rooted in the class struggle rather than religious sentiments. Their party led a true war of maneuver, which means actual war on the state, that directly threatened the colonial status quo. Alarmed, the British swiftly executed Bhagat Singh and co-opted bourgeoisie and the nationalist parties to serve as controlled outlet for popular dissent. For Gramsci, movements like Gandhi were passive revolutions, religiously inflected, non-violent methods that offered temporary catharsis, but ultimately helped preserve British rule. Jinnah, a secular bourgeois himself, was increasingly alienated by Nehru and the dominant Congress. He, akin to them, opted to preserve the class interest under the veneer of Muslim liberation. Number 2, partition and the politics of division. India's partition along religious lines served 3 key colonial objectives. It granted the indigenous bourgeoisie a state while maintaining colonial power structure. It created 2 perpetually insecure, hostile states, and it neutralized the Marxistic threat in a unified India. Pakistan was designed as a Muslim anti-Soviet bulwark to serve Western strategic interests in the Middle East. In 1946, which is very important, naval uprising marked the last serious attempt by a subaltern to unite India under a secular socialist vision. Both Congress and the Muslim League betrayed the movement, selling it out to the British to preserve their own pathway to power. As Gramsci observed, capitalist political leaders are often more mere expression of structural forces they cannot fully comprehend or control. The bourgeois leaders, for him, are the manifestations of specific relations of immediate political organization and military forces they haven't created themselves and have failed to correct, if at all they attempted to do so. Despite religious differences, they all serve their class interests. They are so much identical to each other that in Shakespearean's words, one half of me is yours, the other half yours, more mine own, I would say, but if mine, then yours, and so all yours. So basically, they all were one. Despite their ideological differences, Congress and Muslim League were both bourgeois parties. For Gramsci, such parties either represent producers' interests or act as parasites. Coachman flies, he uses the word. They're coachman flies, making little impact on the state while exploiting its machinery for favoritism. Third is post-colonial Caesarism and bureaucratic supremacy. The Muslim League, a hollow political entity, quickly collapsed into dependence on its charismatic leader, Jinnah. His decision to bypass the elected prime minister in favor of cabinet secretary Chaudhry Muhammad Ali marked the ascendancy of the bureaucracy. This emerged a new ruling bloc, post-colonial, intermediaries, feudals, bureaucrats, and comprador capitalists who constructed a system of domination from which they themselves could not escape. The era exemplifies what we may call post-colonial Caesarism, a fragile equilibrium among competing civilian elites, with bureaucracy as the central force until the military emerged as a decisive third force. Gramsci wrote, the bureaucracy is the most dangerously hidebound and conservative force. If it becomes a compact body, independent of the masses, the party becomes anachronistic and in times of crisis is avoided of its social content. Next is oscillation between Bonapartism and Caesarism. Bonapartism is a term used by Marx in an 18th premiere, and it was related to Bonaparte, Napoleon Bonaparte. So Pakistan's state apparatus, in its relentless pursuit of capital accumulation, has utilized legal, military, and ideological tools to dispossess its marginalized population, particularly in Bengal, which became East Bangladesh, and Balochistan. The state has often presented itself as a unifier, only to suppress political contestation and centralize power in a paternalistic elite. As Gramsci noted, the government operated as a party. It set itself above the parties not to harmonize their interest, but to disintegrate them, to detach them from the masses, and obtain a force of non-party men linked by paternalistic ties of a Bonapartist, Caesarist type. Importantly, a Caesarist solution can exist even without a Caesar, without any great heroic or representative personality. Every coalition government, he says, is the first stage of Caesarism. Pakistan continues to oscillate between direct military Bonapartism and Caesarist coalition. Today's hybrid regime reflects Gramsci's insight that such systems are led by dangerously unaccountable bureaucracies dominating without legitimacy. Recent regional conflicts have momentarily revived a sense of hegemonic unity in the dominant province, where capital accumulation has occurred. Yet, across the country, the dominant strategy remains accumulation through dispossession. Next is neoliberal Caesarism in the 21st century. Post 9/11 period ushered in a new era, new liberal Caesarism. The Pakistani state, a security-centric, extremely aligned operators that prioritizes surveillance, capital accumulation for the center, and elite consolidation over mass welfare, gave up even the false pretense of securing the public interest by becoming totalitarian. Temporary hegemonies, bolstered by foreign aid, military partnerships, and and hitting back the enemy in recent skirmishes, are now being eroded by inflation, discontent, and ideological decay. Gramsci reminds us that historical blocks are needed to offer path forward towards liberation. But in contemporary Pakistan, the formation of such a bloc, a coalition capable of challenging peripheral capitalism and Caesarist rule, remains unlikely, though not impossible. The conclusion is that partition, rather than liberating the subcontinent, entrenched colonial structure under new guise. Through Gramscian lens, we understand Pakistan's journey not as a rupture from colonialism, but as its transformation from Caesarism to Bonapartism, From passive revolution to neoliberal authoritarianism, the structure of domination have remained intact. Only the actors have changed. The crisis consists precisely in the fact that old is dying and new is yet to be born, and this is the time for the monsters. The need, as ever, is not just to interpret the world, but to transform it. Thank you.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. My name is Amrita Ghosh, and I just wanted to start by thanking Mela Nordic, especially Untitled Chapter, for giving us the space for creating a dialogue for 78 years of partition voices from across boundaries, borders, different kinds of positionalities and perspectives, which is incredibly important beyond the kind of homogenization that is going on both sides of the border, or right now, all kinds of spaces in imperialist making. A quick introduction. I'm an assistant professor at University of Central Florida in Orlando, and my trajectory as a scholar began with partition studies. I've written a lot on partition. Specifically, how I came to today's topic is Isma Chugtai, one of her works, much lesser known than Lehaf, of course, is Roots, Jade. And that particular short story has haunted me for quite a while. And it talks about this particular family that immediately after the partition has to move away, migrate to the newly created established Pakistan. And Amma, the female protagonist in that family, is friends with the female protagonist in the Hindu family, the neighbor. And they share a deeply, deeply entwined history of friendship, of solidarity. And Amma is a very Manto-esque, Toba Take Singh kind of figure who refuses to leave. And there's this kind of a moment in that story that I really remember where in the night, when this kind of nationalist jingoism is going on, that, you know, the borders have been ordained, the families are separated, the friendship is at stake. Amma and Roopchandji, that's the other side of the Hindu family, Roopchandji's wife, they secretly meet together to give food to each other. And to me, that marks a kind of beyond borders, a certain kind of friendship. And I'm really interested in how radical friendship can transform. I'm really honored that Dr. Nagy spoke about transformation from the structures of class. I was really amazed by both the talks that happened before by Dr. Butt and Dr. Nagy, and also the artwork, that story Beyond Borders by Hamama Bushra. So as a third generation post-partition subject, I want to begin with two distinct autoethnographic moments to speak in how to understand partition's post-memories. And I'm really interested in post-memories because I think it was around 2022, 2023, I started thinking about this. The Indian government at that time talked about Vibhishika Smriti Divas, and it was August 14th that is now commemorated as Vibhishika Smriti Divas. Vibhishika is horror. So I'm interested in how do we look back at the partition? And of course, the nation states ask us to remember it with this horror, right? And what does that remembering with horror do to us? It creates more differences, the us versus thems, that Dr. Butt talked about. And my work increasingly is looking at how do we deal with the present moment? How do we deal with ethical futurities? And how do we connect? So the first instance that I want to really pick on is May 2025, just 2 months ago, when the war cries from India were being rallied as I made my way towards an 18.5 non-stop flight in Air India from New York to Delhi to visit family. My family's based in Kolkata right now. We've been moving a lot. So, if you ask me, my positionality is I'm a woman beyond borders. I come from very feminist positionalities in rethinking the partition also. Needless to say, post the Pahalgam attack in Kashmir, tensions had then escalated between India and Pakistan, with India suspending and threatening to block the Indus Water Treaty for the water flow into Pakistan, and Pakistan closing airspace for all Indian commercial airlines to fly into India. As I spoke to a fellow academic in Kolkata, he burst out saying, and pardon the lingo, air and water really? Kiske baat ka hai? He said. The statement stuck to me for days. Whose father does it belong to, in translation? Partition and the Anthropocene has received little attention, and yet one does wonder about the massive ecological costs and the destruction of life worlds in our geological epoch of the Anthropocene, in which the industrial, corporate, profit-oriented statist activities severely alter the planetary and earthly systems, with catastrophic breakdown threatening the survivability of civilization and millions of people across the borders. It does beget more haunting existential and ontological questions about our existence and the air we breathe in, and the life-generating resources that cannot be partitioned, but are dangerously under domination and status control in the era of the Anthropocene. I want to turn to a second memory and history in how to counter such status tendencies to divide the air we breathe in. And how much of the air is India or Pakistan? You know, is there a feet that is marked? Is there a parameter that, you know, this is my air and your air? So this is kind of fascinating and ontological questions too. So I grew up listening in another, as I said, I'm a third generation partition subject. So I was born in Kolkata. We moved around to New Delhi where the effects of partition and, you know, the sort of memory, the hauntingness was there. And then larger parts of my life have been in New Jersey, where I looked at diasporic understandings of partition, and then Sweden, now based in Orlando or somewhere in between. So I grew up hearing of a story based in South Kolkata, neighborhood in 1946, just a little before partition literally happened. And this area was engulfed in violence and intense rioting, with neighbors killing each other from the wrong side of religion. My grandmother, Anima Ghosh, decided to give shelter and protection to a young Muslim neighbor who had not yet fled or crossed the borders into East Pakistan then, now Bangladesh. The Muslim neighbor, a carpenter who worked for the family during those days, stayed with our family in a closed room for more than 2 weeks till the gruesome violence had subsided, and the family, and he finally managed to flee the dominantly Hindu locality and cross the borders into Bangladesh, and then East Pakistan. The story trickled down into the family even after my grandmother's passing, reminding us of the tragic parting from people who lived together in a community till partition's ugly fangs ripped apart human from human, now discerned only as Hindus or Muslims or Sikhs. I begin with this essay with these two ethnographic memories to explore the idea of how third-generation partition subjects look back at the partition and the present time, and why it is profoundly important to engage with such counter stories and art that connects and transcends borders and boundaries. So I'm really focused in the idea of looking back and remembering the partition and what this idea of remembering means. How do art and aesthetics of partition's post-memories remember the partition with Alegropolitical frameworks? And I'm going to explain that term in a second. I focus on partition's post-memories as it enacts the present digital visual culture and trace cross-border visual cultures to understand how present generations rethink partition's legacy and trauma to adopt a different frame of convivial resistance. Literally, Alegropolitics is the politics of joy. A term that was coined by Ananya Kabir, the joy in building communities, collective joy and solidarity in the aftermath of the partition. And we are living through a long partition. Partition has never really ended. It affects everything in that region of South Asia. Geopolitically, as I said, the Indus Water Treaty, Kashmir is a cauldron of everything that we talk about. So my recent most book is on partition's effects on Kashmir and the violence in covert and overt ways that has happened on the Indian side of Kashmir. I haven't been able to do any research on the Pakistani side, so my book is entirely focused on the Indian side. So I explore the stories that underscore love and a past that can be re-evaluated and recalled with solidarity and Alegropolitics. For analyzing this, I will discuss 2 case studies and talk about how partition's post-memories shift in their recalling this traumatic event, not as a vibhishaka, not as a horror. So I'm looking at first the Google's now iconic reunion ad from 2013. Has anybody seen that ad or recalls this ad from 2013? It was a very famous ad by Google. And then a second case study is the Punjabi Leher channel, started by 2 Pakistani and Indian friends, Nasir Dillon and Bhupinder Singh in 2016. So my case studies are 2013, 2016. Both of these case studies mentioned here roughly span about a decade and are seemingly disparate in the visual text, but create specific kinds of narratives that recreate post-memories of partition and transcend cross-border hegemonies. Post-memory, as a quick notion, is a term coined by famous thinker Marion Hirsch in her work, The Generation of Post-Memory, and she's obviously working on the memory of the Holocaust, where she's discussing the relationship where the generation after has to deal with this collective trauma, but also speak to those who have not directly experienced the traumatic events. According to Hirsch, this connection to the past is through imaginative projection and creation. In an interview, she states, inherited trauma transmitted familially or even culturally can have significant effects on our lives. So for Hirsch, the Holocaust is an event in a global space of remembrance that looks towards the future and knows the past deeply, but that not which can be paralyzed through darkness. Scholars of post-memory studies also explained historical trauma that can transmit onto next generations through memory and post-memory, not only directed to the past, but also in how we can create hopeful futures. And that is where I'm really deeply interested in. Most recently, there has been an explosion of creativity inherent in the practices of visual arts and the partition. And such practices, and there's so many artists that we can think about. Nalini Malani comes into my mind immediately. And they have talked about critiquing closures, historical inevitabilities that comes with the regrettable legacy of the border. And some of it we see in Hamama Bushra's work also, how she's rethinking the border and these kinds of divisions. So this very famous ad from 2013, Google Reunion, it came from Google launching this idea of what does the partition border mean in India and Pakistan. It presents Suman, the granddaughter of Baldev from Indian Punjab, who decides to search for a grandfather's best friend from pre-partition times in Lahore. The ad begins with Baldev telling Suman stories of his youth in pre-partition Lahore, when he and his best friend Yusuf flew kites, ate special sweets from his friend's family sweet shop. In one scene, Baldev reminisces the horrors of partition, where he had to migrate across newly created borders. What transpires is a beautiful story of friendship coming together, with Suman finding the oldest sweet shop in Lahore and her grandfather often talking about Yusuf, finally, who travels to Delhi with his grandson for a surprise visit to his friend's birthday in Delhi. The 2 post-partition, third generation characters in the story, Suman, the granddaughter, and Fazal, the grandson, incorporate post-memories towards solidarity and even an obligation towards regenerative and radical friendships. In this case, post-memory operates distinctively from the traumatic memory of the partition itself, with the 2 older generation of grandfathers who are represented as somber, mourning, nostalgically longing for past. The act represents a familial post-memory by the young grandkids who commit to recreation and hope. Of course, it is quite a contradiction in obtaining visas on the ground itself between India and Pakistan, as we know, and such easy access to friends or uprooted families is a distant dream for both India and Pakistan. However, the ad not only operates as a desire towards a rethinking of partition in making creating a new imagination, but it also impacts on potential change on austere border politics. Post the success of this ad, Pakistani journalist and human rights activist Beena Sarwar created what she called the Milne Do campaign, let people meet. I'm quoting Sarwar here. If the reunion ad moved you, go to the Milne Do petition link and sign the campaign against India-Pakistan visa restrictions. Every voice counts. Ironically, there were some voices of critique for Google India also, not for the message in the ad, but some critics rightfully reminded that the plot and the story were based on an original Pakistani short film that was called Respect. And it was also about a similar narrative of friendship and healing between India and Pakistan. But the problem is that Google never acknowledged that original story, as it gets obfuscated under capitalist projects. This also points to the social and cultural capital that Indian popular entertainment industry holds, under which very few Pakistani cultural productions get acknowledged. This specifically also unravels the problematic aspect of adopting an original Pakistani text without proper credit. One may also critique the use of a catastrophic event like partition to create a feel-good story about a search engine's effectiveness. While that may be true, the desire located in the ad towards an alternative imagination cannot be mistaken. Such a story subverts the borders and animosity between the two nations and highlights the post-partition third generation's attempt in reconfiguring a certain kind of hegemonic status quo and calling forth an action into futurity that makes a different claim on the past. And if that is an alternative desire in the post-memory, perhaps there is some value in it. As seen in the subsequent impacts in the Milne Do campaign, the desire is not far off. In more recent memory, renowned Pakistani singer Ali Sethi's song Pasuri went viral in 2022, depicting a story of forbidden love, but also passionate romance that has been narrated or explained as the symbolic relationship between India and Pakistan. The reunion ad serves as a reminder of how visual cultures serve as important spaces for reconciliation of historical trauma, healing, and a relationship of pain between subjects. I want to move into the next, quickly, the second, the channel that I'm interested in. Do I have about 5 minutes? Okay, yeah. Thank you. My second example comes from the summer of 2022 when Punjabi Leher, a YouTube channel run by ex-Pakistani policeman Nasir Dillon and his Indian Punjabi friend Bhupinder Singh went viral. They suddenly became very famous. Both third-generation post-partition subjects. Dillon runs a real estate company in a Pakistani small city hundreds of miles from the Indian border. In 2016, Dillon got introduced to another third-generation Indian subject, Singh, via a Facebook page from the Indian side of Punjab, and thus began a friendship leading to the creation of Punjabi Leher. Their friendship is iconic for the work they do in reuniting people from across the borders. These are long lost friends, survivors of partition who went missing, people separated from relatives in the aftermath of partition. The channel documents stories with interviews, and Dillon talks about more than 200 such reunions that have occurred since Punjabi Leher took off on social media. The caption running on Punjabi Leher channel emphasizes Punjabi Leher is endeavoring to bridge the gap between East and West Punjab, created by the partition of 1947. Punjabi Leher, through its medium, is spreading the message of love and cooperation between the borders. With our support, it will always be our and your endeavor to create an environment of love. This is radical love that I'm focusing on. The channel recently also got covered by New York Times, where Dillon was interviewed, and he stated, "In media and elsewhere, we were told a different story about partition, about differences and enmity between the people. But our elders speak of a time when Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus all lived peacefully together." Clearly, an Alegropolitical dimension is taking place here. When the two nation states have never created a provision for once lost families or friends to find each other in the recent times at least, and there were very sort of preliminary provisions immediately after partition that we can speak of later, it is a telltale sign that radical friendships such as these have fulfilled such yearnings of finding once separated people. Punjabi Leher, literally meaning the Punjabi wave, thus symbolizes a wave of solidarity sweeping over a severe border that is infamous for not granting visas to citizens from both sides of the border. And this actually goes beyond, people from both sides of the border, because My husband is Swedish and he wanted to get a visa into India very recently, and he had to fill out a whole, I think about 5-6 pages of forms where it asked him about his grandmother, his mother, his father, his grandfather, if they had any affiliation to Pakistan. I mean, this is where the situation is right now. But what I'm really focusing on is the tools of conviviality, a term by Cameron McCarthy, who says that visual text and aesthetics can shape post-colonial imaginations and subversive potentials that can emerge alternative forms of affect, feeling, affiliation, community well-being, and offer critical starting points for us and lead to emancipatory visions. Such convivial ways of remembering syncretic pasts also poses as counter-memory of partition's post-memories. In 2022, Punjabi Lahars released the story of unification of two brothers, Sadiq Khan from Pakistan and Sikka Khan from Bathinda in India, one separated in 1947's partition riots when they were very young. 74 years later, in 2022, the brothers met in a teary hug, publicly captured on the channel, and it was really moving. I saw the story unfolding, and I think some other channels also picked it up. But what was very interesting is beyond the two people that obviously were impacted, the people around them. There were hordes of groups of people from both sides of the village, not knowing anything or having any relationships on the other side, that held hands to just meet the other people. It was a very beautiful, again, Alegropolitical meeting. Beyond the moving real footage of the once separated people coming together in the short videos published by the channel, it was the entourage from both sides accompanying the parties that were important to see the utmost glee in the bystanders. They present a certain jubilant reunion of people in the present increasingly hostile times. I'm going to skip quickly, and I want to end in order to bridge how partition's aesthetic post-memories evoke and can become subversive counter-memories. These examples reflect deterritorialized modes of being in disparate belongings. In both the cases that I mentioned here, the emphasis is on how to remember the past, one that is overshadowed by the painful legacies. In that, it is not undermining or erasing, obviously, the horrific trauma that is there of the partition, but the divergent kinds of visual cultures rethinking conventional articulations about partition, especially in the present climate of heightened divisions and foundationalist premises of nation states. These stories provoke alternative spaces of expressions through joy and reimagined visions. They allow for a coming together and possibility of rethinking post-partition subjectivities through love, radical intimacies. Thus, partition's Alegropolitics has the potential to alter, reshape, and not to engage through radical, and not to just engage with the radical recountering of hateful past, but in evoking a space of borderlessness. This kind of rethinking of identities and post-partition memories do not erase the politics of location and space and cultures. Rather, these examples elicit and emphasize the interconnectedness of the dependencies on each other and speak of ways in how to be and live together in an increasingly splintered world. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And most importantly, Talat Butt and Dr. Amrita, who managed it all in this, short span of time. I will be speaking about my book, which is coming out at end of this month. It's titled 75 Years of Partition, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Actually, it was on these 75 years of the partition, me and my co-editor, Amit Ranjan, who is at National University of Singapore, we issued a special issue of a journal called India Review. And then Routledge approached us start of this year. They wanted to publish it. So basically, it was a special issue. There are some flyers. You can get it after the talk. When he approached me for this special issue, I think a year ahead or 2 years ahead of the 75 years, I replied like this: okay, Ahmed, why 75 years? Like,
I'm not in favor of this ritualistic publication of something, okay, 50 years of partition, 75, there will be 100 years of partition, 80 years of partition. Let me think. I won't commit until I have a reason to do it. And I wanted to, theorize, to rationalize, to, look into the very rationale of it all. One day I was just scrolling through my Facebook, and there was this Facebook post, some cricket match was going on between, or had just ended. Pakistan was beaten by Bangladesh. And there was some Indian connection. Either the Bangladesh team had an Indian coach, or the umpire was an Indian, and the Pakistanis were, complaining that, okay, this umpire was siding with actually Bangladesh team. So the post was something like this: you can't do anything without Indian help. Some Pakistani had written it. And it was reference to 1971. And that, helped me rationalize, theorize also, that I'll speak in a while, why we need to look into the question of partition, because partition is not just the event in 1947, it is constantly reproduced on daily basis. So that also, in a way, shaped the kind of theory that I've tried to, present in my chapter. It's very short at this stage. Hopefully in future, I'll manage to develop it further. So I theorized it. Okay, it's not the first effort, but I think in this way, it has not yet been done. It was a first effort. I conceptualized partition as a sort of three-stage thing: the context, the colonialism, which set the stage for partition. I think without the colonial experience of Indian subcontinent, this would not have happened. Okay, even before the talk started, there was some discussion going on about the pluses and minuses of colonialism. However, whatever way you interpret the history, India would have been perhaps, or the Indian subcontinent would have been very different without colonialism. How, we can't say, but definitely this partition was very much set as a result of the experience of colonialism. Secondly, the event itself, 1947, 14-15 August, whatever you call it. On the one hand, and this is not my definition, some Scottish scholar defined it, partition was actually an exit strategy for the British colonialism. It was not the Indian subcontinent. So this event is the second stage. And then what I call memorialization, where we reproduce it, not we, the ruling classes on both sides of Wagah border, they reproduce it on daily basis through ideological state apparatuses, film, textbooks, media, poetry, fiction, whatnot. So this is, the kind of the theory, the reason we published this book. We look at the reproduction of partition in 3 countries: Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. It's very dark here, Talat. It's very difficult to read my notes. Talat grabbed my laptop, actually. It was not working. So I'll try to, look into my notes as well. So from India, there was a chapter on the status of Urdu in India. And we look at the, reproduction of partition through the politics of language there as well, how Urdu has been Muslimized, and, the history and all that. It's a wonderful contribution by my co-editor, Amit Ranjan. And then also there is a chapter on Indian films post-2000. In last about, actually the book came out 3 years ago, first 2 decades, 4 films, how they look at partition. And there was this film Pinjar. It was based on Amrita's novel, kya naam tha? Amrita ka?
Amrita Preetham.
Amrita Preetham, Sahir's friend as well. We were speaking about Sahir. He will be mentioned yet again. Then there was this film Uri, The Surgical Strike. शायद आप लोगों ने देखी हो, you might have seen it. Veer Zara, another Shah Rukh Khan and क्या नाम था उस लड़की का? हाँ, yeah, Pretty Zinta. And Jaisa Delhi, Vaisa Lahore. Maybe you might not have. This was low budget, very sort of alternative cinema kind of thing. Well, the Gira Rai, she's very known film critic and scholar from India. She points out that look, this all these films, one way or the other, they sort of reproduce the mainstream official narratives in India. However, some, like if you look at Pinjar, it's very nuanced in relation to gender and all that. Similarly, Jaisa Delhi, Vaisa Lahore, it also goes against the grain kind of mainstream narratives there. So film is rather, complicated affair, but largely they argue, and I don't have to even point out because I think we are all into Indian films, really BJPized. The Bollywood has been BJPized. Just the other day, since I'm on sort of holidays, I was watching this on Netflix, Sikandar by Salman Khan, because it was a big flop. I wanted to see why, and I realized why. But there was like one scene, like he goes to a Bombay neighborhood, and in the background there is Qawwali mentioning Prophet Muhammad and all that. And I thought, how come BJP is not protesting against it? Even this small, and I think whatever you think about Salman Khan and all the other Khans, in this film there was this, slight twist. I don't know, was it intentional or what? Even the one character, the small boy, is named something Muslim, Kabiruddin. So the situation has become so terrible in Bollywood that even these small things now attract you as a viewer or a critic, whatever you are. It's that bad. And this is what they point out, that, okay, even these films, one based on Amrita Preetham's novel, or, some low budget alternative kind cinema, even there, largely it is the mainstream narrative which is reproduced. That's about India. From Bangladesh, there was a chapter on, again, one on films and other on Bengali literature. Both these chapters, the one on literature is discussing 12 words, so I won't go into it. In the case of films, again, the stress in Bangladesh has been 1971, not 1947. Only 3 films, according to that chapter and that research, and 1 documentary has been produced on the partition of 1947, and then dozens and dozens of documentaries, especially documentaries, and some fiction films on the 1971 War of Liberation. So whole stress there is, on 71 for them. And there is discussion, if you look at the literature review there is some discussion whether, this was continuation of the 47 or what and all that. I personally, since everybody has his or her viewpoint and they can argue for that, I personally, in my chapter, I argue that 71 is not partition. I see it differently. Although you can ground it there, it was a, product of 47. But again, we need to approach it differently. I see it as separatism. For instance, in the case of Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, they also led to creation of new states. But that's a discussion which was not possible here, and I won't go in here either. I will speak more about Pakistan. There was actually one chapter by Dr. Kassar Abbas, a very good friend. He died last year. He co-edited our previous book on media in Pakistan. It was called From Television to Terrorism. Last year, he died of cancer. He was teaching for many years, moved to the USA in 1980s, and he was, there for 30 years. He actually looks at a novel by Khatija Mastoor. In English, in Urdu, it's titled Zameen. And Khatija Mastoor and her sister Hajra Masroor, they are not very much mentioned anymore. Both of them were excellent writers at one time, quite famous, I think. One of them, I don't remember which one. Nagisa Bhiya Bhatti hai, maybe he can tell us. She was engaged to Sahir as well. Anyway.
Zahir Babar was the husband of Khatija Mastoor.
Yes.
And the second one, Hajra was.
Yeah, and Zahir was a very noted Marxist journalist for the language, and nephew to Ahmed Kasmi. Anyway, so she wrote two very famous novels, Angan, which came out 1962, and it has been translated as Women Courtyard. Zameen, translated as Promised Land. You can read them in English as well. Both actually, they're not, Zameen is not or Promised Land is not a sequel to Angan, but they both are written in the context of partition. Angan looks more at the pre-partition thing. Okay, it comes to partition and the protagonist of women. And it's very interesting in both novels, the women are protagonists, and Amrita, who approaches from gender viewpoint, I think she will be very interested in these works. The first novel is about four brothers, their families, politically divided between Muslim League and Indian National Congress. So that kind of, setting. And then the main character, she comes to Pakistan because she wants to build a new life in a promised new land, Muslim Zion, however you define it. The other novel is, these families are kind of families with a feudal background, and now they have fallen from the status of upper class to rather kind of what Hamza Alvi says, salariate, that kind of class characterization. But Zameen is more about, it begins at the famous, if you are into partition studies and history of Pakistan, there was some refugee camp at Walton Road, Lahore. It is set in that background. There are 6 women, with, from these camps, and mostly from lower middle class or kind of working class, you can say, and how they end up. Then to quote Dr. Kasser, he says, migrancy offers both hope, but as well as it is about emptiness. And I think many of us have these experiences when we come to Sweden or the USA or whatever. There is a lot of hope as well. Okay, we will manage this, we will learn Swedish, we will do this and that, but also some emptiness. And I think my personal interest, Talat told me next speaker is at 4, so I have some time to speak about my personal interest as well, why I'm into partition studies. Not very, sort of systematically, every now and then I do something because of my family experience. And here Riaz is sitting there, a good friend of mine. His family has this partition history. Ajmal Butt, he's standing there. Both me and Ajmal's family, our families migrated from Jammu to Sialkot. And his family moved to the city, Sialkot city. My bradri was actually on the both sides of the border, Jammu and Punjab. So we just ended up on the other side of the border from my village. It's just 2 kilometers on this side. We can see the Jammu hills. I wrote a chapter on Kashmir for another book at the time. I began it with my family history, talking about my grandfather. my grandfather every morning. And this is, we often meet when I'm in Stockholm. So we were talking about our family histories in relation to partition. And I was telling them about my grandfather literally every morning. He was a very jolly person otherwise. He would listen to BBC Urdu. At the time, it was 6:30 service as well. Then he would yell at Jinnah for about 10 minutes in the most worst possible Punjabi expletives. He would yell at it. That this mustacheless man, he left nobody alive on the border. This is what he would say. I mean, somehow for him it was a bad thing to be mustacheless. He himself had big mustache. Anyway, and that in a way, I used to, like my brothers, my father was in Air Force. We were going to an Air Force school and college where we were indoctrinated into Pakistan studies. There we learn great things about Jinnah. We come home and our grandfather is teaching something else and we would speak to him. Lalaji, we would call him Lalaji. He was such a great man. He built us this country of Muslims. And he would just laugh or tell us, no, your books are false. He was not even literate. They teach you lies. And all my friends were Hindus and Sikhs, and my best friend was Sikh, and they were not like this. Hindus were not like this. So this, and many families go through this, and the biggest trauma is like in our countryside home. Every evening, like I was in my countryside home with my father. He was born there. I think he was 7, 8 years old when he moved, but he remembers his countryside home in Jammu. So he's just looking there. Oh, you see these clouds? All of a sudden, we were having a cup of chai. See that cloud? This is over the village your mother belonged to. And if this cloud goes 2 kilometers this way, let's see if it goes. There we had our village. So every evening, every morning, and my daughter who is born here in Stockholm, 16 years, she knows she comes from Jammu, and she also argues with me, why can't we call ourselves Indians if it is in the Indian side? She knows that, there is a connection with Jammu and Kashmir. So this personal thing. And, this kind of research project in Pakistan has looked into textbooks. So one of my good friends and colleagues, a historian at Faisalabad University, he has contributed a chapter on school books that are taught, how 71 and 47 are taught in these school books. And he compares 2 periods, the Zia dictatorship and the Musharraf dictatorship. The Zia dictatorship, is the period when Islamization of textbooks really happened. It wasn't new, it was already there, but then there was this guy he has mentioned who wanted Islamization of knowledge, and Jamaat-e-Islami became very powerful. Jamaat-e-Islami is more like, brotherhood in Egypt. They really penetrated media, judiciary, education institutions, and all these education-related kind of things. And Mazhar argues that Musharraf, who wanted to de-radicalize the textbooks, failed largely because of Jamaat-e-Islami people stuffed into higher education and all that. Because higher education and the textbook boards, like India, you have, it's the state which decides the textbooks. Likewise in Pakistan, all the 4 provinces have their own textbook boards, which, set the textbook syllabus for the students. Talat Kangya, I try to show you one quotation. You can read this red one, just to save time. I managed, Talat.
Okay, good. So we'll wait for Usman.
I need a couple of more minutes. I finished by 4.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's fine.
मेरा अपना chapter तो मेरा था. And then there is this 3rd chapter on Pakistan. it was my own chapter. I looked at 4 films beside this small effort to do the theorization of the partition. I looked at 4 films on partition. Again, in the case of Pakistan, once this may come surprise to many, actually, it often comes as a surprise to many in Pakistan itself. Pakistan was one of the 10 biggest film producing countries in the world up till early 90s. They were producing over 100 films. 19 onwards, there is, a decline, and now it's close to zero. But very few films on partition, very few films. Okay, if you exclude kind of films where partition plays some sort of context, otherwise a film which is, grounded in partition itself somehow, there are very few, hardly 1 dozen films. And I look at Kartar Singh, which in a way was the first most important film. And this film is very interesting because instead of what our colleague was talking about, Sahir, because it was a communist who made this film, it doesn't dehumanize the other. It's, a beautiful film to watch. And one of its song remains very popular. It's part of the wedding songs, Veeranda, Desanda Raja, Babul da Pyara, to this day. Then there was another film, again, late 60s, Lakhon Mein Ek, One Among the Millions, typical mainstream, and it is set in the context of Kashmir partition, India, Pakistan, ideology of Pakistan, two-nation theory, all that kind of mainstream nonsense. Another very interesting film, Jinnah, 1997. This film was made with state money. It was aimed at projecting Jinnah. Actually, the project was initially conceived in response to Attenborough's Gandhi. Gandhi was very popular, the film and the leader. So Zia wanted a film in response to it. Pakistan always wants to this tit for tat. Luckily, what Zia wanted and the script was written, the film was not made because Jinnah was very Wahhabi kind of fanatic in that film. The project was shelved. It was written again, the script, and it came out, and okay, some sort of the basic theme remains the same, two-nation theory, but Jinnah is, at least in this film, shown as someone who is against fundamentalists, which I don't agree. I think he was the fundamentalist. So I don't go into that debate. And the 4th film is Khamosh Pani, Silent Waters. This film was banned in Pakistan. So my sort of like Gira Roy and her colleague, the 2 of them wrote this chapter. My actually chapter is titled something is, mujhe apna title bhul raha hai. It's written there. Surprise departures as well, part of the title is. So the films on partition actually offer more nuanced picture of partition if you look at these films, especially Kartar Singh and Khamosh Pani. But even in Lakhon Ka Ek, there are, some interesting nuances. So this was for me a surprise in itself that, even the Pakistani cinema on this question is rather nuanced. So this is what we look at in this book, the reproduction of partition rather than the event. And I think the work is in every case very original, very interesting. Don't try to buy the book. It's very expensive. If you are interested, approach me. I'll tell you the alternative ways. One last minute is there, and I want to go beyond this book and point out a few things that I was speaking even to Lisa. This is becoming increasingly difficult, especially if you're placed in Pakistan or any of these countries, to collaborate with our colleagues in other South Asian countries. I'm editing another book. A guy from Kashmir based in Delhi was supposed to write a chapter and the deadline was already gone. I extended it to 30th of July. He refused to contribute. He said, okay, I'm under huge pressure. I don't want to contribute. And even Lisa was telling me she doesn't want to come to Pakistan because her Indian visa will be in problem and vice versa. This is one thing, which is increasingly, even in the case of this book, like, okay, I'm I call it war of liberation. But my publishers were a bit worried at the time. Even when we were doing it for India Review, should we use the term war of liberation because it can create problem for you in Pakistan? I said, don't worry, I'm doing it myself. But then we have very few people in Pakistan who would use this term. So, increasingly the space to collaborate and to, have this kind of research work even is becoming difficult. Yes.
I have to say something. The book is really nice, and I like novel part. You should add 2 more novels. All those are maybe Kudatullah Shahab, although he's a right winger and we may not agree with his ideology, but his novel Yakuda, it's also related to the rape of women and partition. When I read that novel, it's a very small novel, and I was literally crying. That means you can put narrative like see somebody who's extremely right winger who believe in our kind of absurdities at times, Sufism in his own imagination. So he also feels the pain of partition. That's my suggestion. And your work is really nice. And
Yeah, thanks. But then there is Naseem Hijazi as well, and
should put Naseem Hijazi, but Yahuda
yeah,
is very beautiful.
I've read that. I read that, and he was also from Jammu, and he has written a lot of lies in his book Shahabnama, and
But
all-
the novel is more.
Yes.
I read the Shahabnama as well, but that novel was really good. It has nothing related to religion as I read, but it was more of a tragedy.
yeah. Thank you very much. And over to Khalid.
One more thing.
So, Usman T. Malik is a Pakistani American writer whose fiction has been published in various places internationally: Wired magazine, Al Jazeera, and in a dozen more best of year anthologies, including Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy Series. His debut collection, Midnight Doorways, Fables from Pakistan, won the 2022 Cranford Award for the International Association for Fantastic in Arts. And I have taught that book. My students absolutely loved it, and I have been really writing on it. So please, if you get a chance, if probably you have already, do read it. Usman Malik is also the co-founder of the Salam Award for Imaginative Fiction, which since 2016 has been nurturing Pakistani writers of speculative fiction and magic realism. And this is just a very short introduction to Usman Malik. So I don't want to take away much time. I wanted to begin with the question to you, Usman, today. What does the partition, or what do these 78 years of partition mean to you as a writer of Pakistani origin?
I'm not a scholar. I'm just a writer, so I don't have any academic theories on this or what it could mean. I don't have any big grandiose ideas. But I am a student of history, and I do love reading history. And I think the Indo-Pak partition and the subsequent Bangladesh partition, um, for someone like me, partition is, of course, something that sort of had become inevitable, but it is also something that, to many Pakistani and Indian ears, is an artificial imposition, right? So borders and boundaries are fluctuating things in human history. And partition suddenly seemed like this cold, dark slamming down. Bapsi Sidhwa has a line, right, where there's a little kid whom Sidhwa's character talks about. The little kid hears about partition, and she's like, "What is this partition?" And someone says they're gonna break up the country in two, and she imagines an egg being broken into two, right? So that egg being broken into two, I think, is a pretty good symbol for partition. Um, as far as for me, in terms of identity splits and the consequences of um, the exile, we often forget, I think, that Pakistani and Indians are now exiled from a country called Hindustan. Um, I think, Amrita, you and I have talked about this. The word Hindu is really of Arabo-Persian origin. It is not a word that people in India used to use to refer to themselves. So the word Hindu originally encompassed Muslims, Sikhs, Jains, everyone. And so for me, partition then also is a literary formula now to what that has created its own genre. So those are some thoughts that I have when I think about partition.
Mm. And I think when we previously spoke, Usman, we also talked about the word, as you mentioned, Hindustan. I mean, it comes from the Indus and, the river itself, right? So it doesn't even belong to the idea of Hindu-ness in any kind of way, right? But I'm also interested because so we have had some artists speak about their art, and there was Hamama Bushra's terrific art in rethinking, solidarities and cross-border alliances through women. You are creating a body of work right now in our present moment. How do you see yourself as a writer? And here you may speak about your current or upcoming work. I know it is based on the partition as a backdrop. So can you tell us, can art change anything? Can art create any kinds of spaces for resistance, solidarities, or rethinking the times that we are in, not just the past, but the present itself?
I was reading a book on Indian history recently, and there was a very interesting question about the sword and the pen. And it is not a question that people haven't asked before. It's a question people have been asking since the 12th or 11th century. The debates about whether the pen or the sword is more effective is very, very old, really old. And so, can art ever be meaningful? Can art really change the world? It can be more impactful. As an artist, I fluctuate. I don't know. I don't know how effective art can be in a very hard, often um, cold, indifferent world. There is something, you know, Lovecraftian and cosmically indifferent about how, at the present moment, the world seems to regard art. It's very indifferent in ways because, artists are often thought to be buffoons, maybe no better than the buffoon that uh, entertains the emperor. And as we know, there are many emperors at the moment. So I do think that art creates these sideways pockets where things can happen without sometimes the artist even willing them. And the serendipity of those moments. Just yesterday, I was talking to a friend of mine about dates. You know, it's well known that a lot of Indian emperors never did anything without consulting astrologers, Hindu, Muslim, all of them, right? And the role of astrology and astrology as an art is also something that I keep, I think about. I mean, these are all arts. And so which art are we going to eventually talk about? As the propitious dates when conquests happened or when people led out with armies, even that was an art. So where do we go? It's such a big world. But I do think that the way we envision the world as human beings is often best expressed in art. And maybe that thoughtfulness eventually does lead to Plato's idea of the republic, or, Aristotelian ideas of the universe, or, Copernican ideas of whatever, because science started with art.
Thank you. I don't want to put you in a spot, but do you want to talk about your upcoming novel based on the partition and kind of a backdrop?
Sure. I don't think it's based on the partition, but my novel is it's a haunted Haveli set on the border of India and Pakistan. That's the setting. And we see so many haunted house stories, and we don't really see haunted Havelis in the mainstream. So I wanted to really, and I grew up watching Bollywood movies and Pakistani movies, and Havelis were, Purani Haveli, and that sort of thing was really something that I felt close to, and I wanted to use that. There is, in fact, a village that I visited when Lahore is, next to Wagah border. So for us, the border and the history of partition is so closely always in the backdrop. So there is this village that I visited, and the people in the area call it the last village before India. And there is this Haveli there from probably, I'm guessing, must be 19th century at least, that sits, and from the top of the Haveli, like you can see Indian fields, and so I really wanted to use that as a setting. And so while the novel has nothing to do with partition, it has echoes, uneasy echoes of the similarities and differences that occur across the border. But I guess it's really a dark fantasy. It's kind of like Arabian Nights meets Shirley Jackson. It's set in Pakistan.
I have a follow-up question to the use of horror in that kind of liminal space on the border between India and Pakistan, but I want to quickly see if anybody in the audience has a question for you. Does somebody want to ask Usman a question? Anyone? I'll follow up on the use of the horror. So I know that I have read your first book, the collection at least, the Midnight Doorways, and there are so many other stories that you have published. And in my section of the workshop today, I spoke about the appropriation of the word horror in terms of how the Indian state has used Vibhishika as this idea of horrors of partition coming from the other side, and look what they did to us. So the horror has been appropriated in a very specific nationalist way, right? Vibhishika Smriti Divas. This is our memory of the horror that came from the others, us versus them. But your work, you use the horror genre provocatively, edgy, in a very subversive way. Can you talk about why horror? Like, what interested you about horror, and how do you? I feel that you use it very subversively. Can you talk about your appropriation of the horror as a genre?
Yeah, in terms of, I didn't realize that that was even like an expression that they were using they were weaponizing the expression. Audrey Trusky, the scholar, she just came out with a new book called India 5,000 Years of History, and I just finished reading it, and she talks about partition, and she talks. It's a very interesting book because the narratives are. And the propaganda that often is used on both sides is just very interesting. And Trusky, I think, is a little bit of I think she had a little bit of a countercultural, counter prevailing sort of a thing in mind. And it's a very sensitive book. It's actually, I think, a lot of times, books like Freedom at Midnight, Dominic Lepere, and those books, I feel like those books are often tilted towards a certain angle. And Audrey tries to, walk that line. But one of the things that struck me was she also is very clinically precise, and she talks about partition and the horrors of partition. But, we often forget that if you look at just pure dense numbers, everyone suffered. It was not one person, it was not one community. In fact, if you look at numbers, there were more Muslims killed in partition than there were Hindus. Whatever that term even means. What does that term which Muslims, which Hindus, which sect, which area? So it's just a fraught sort of a thing for people. And I feel like people bring up these sensitivities as if we are not all born of the same soil. There is no sudden metaphysical or chemical structure that changed in 47, right? So I've talked to you about this, right? I'm a physician, I'm a writer, but I refuse to give up my Indianness. I'm not going to give up my Indianness. I have 5,000 years of history. One of the oldest ruins of India are from Mehergarh in Balochistan. And apparently, both Pakistan and India are set on destroying that beautiful area. We are both, we're trying to erase our own history. So I won't accept the erasure of my Indianness. I call myself a Pakistani Indian, and I don't want that taken away from me. So for me, horror, this is horror. This erasure, this non-existence, this removal from me of my own people. If anyone gets hurt in India or Bangladesh, it would hurt me because these are my people. I refuse to give them up. Why would I give them up? That's like giving up, your extended family because you're annoyed by them. I'm not gonna give up my annoying cousins, right? I mean, they're my cousins, they're my family, they're my blood. So for me, that's horror. And my horror starts often at home. You know, we talked about Freud's essay, The Uncanny, you know, the Heimlich and Unheimlich. So what is horror in Freud's view? It's a subversion of the home. It's a subversion of the home. The horror has always existed inside the house, if only we were to see. And we saw plenty in 1947. So whatever happened, theories, I don't care. The point is, on both sides, on three sides, are my people. Sri Lanka, they're my people. You know, Bahadur Shah Zafar was exiled to Rangoon. They're my people. So we lay claim to our people. We don't care. I don't care about land in those ways. I care about my people. So I want to explore every inch of my lands. And for me, horror, it would be just my exile from my people. So I mean, among other things, of course.
Thank you for that. That was really powerful. I want to ask one final question. I mean, you talked about horror begins at home and so many other ways of looking at our present in the horrific ways. But what are the alternative pathways to then move forward? How can we move forward?
You mean in terms of the relations between the three countries?
In so many different ways, in relationships, in everydaynesses, with state
I
apparatuses.
Yeah, you know, I did this speculative fiction panel recently with an for Himalistan, and there were a couple of Sri Lankan artists. There were a couple Indian artists, and Gautam Bhatia was the moderator, who the legal scholar and the editor of
Yes.
Strange Horizons. And so one of the folks was an Indian publisher, and she was talking about. She was commenting on the fact that a lot of South Asians haven't really been using science to write, forward facing, pure science fiction, technological based science fiction. And one of the things I said on that panel was that we can't really dictate where people gravitate towards. We can't really tell people what to be obsessed by. We're going to be obsessed by different things based on perceived wounding, the kind of wounding that people have. And I said that the future is a doppelganger of the past. And how do you move forward? We have to lean back and we have to look back to find the commonalities. We have to look back and see, and again, I'm going to get maybe a little political, but the origins of Hindutva are very recent. The origins of fundamentalism in many ways these are recent concepts in India. These are not very old. People didn't think in these terms, and it's as if we have forgotten that. Our memories are so short. I think we have to reach back and look at all the commonalities. So if you look at me, who am I? I'm a Swan, I'm a writer, I'm a Malik, I'm a Punjabi, I'm a Kakkezai. Who are Kakkezais? You go back in history and you find out that we were horse traders. Literally, we were horse merchants and traders. In the 13th century, 14th century. My origin, my clan's origin in Lahore is 800 years old. So you go back in history and you suddenly find there are many communities in Pashtuns, in probably Sikhs and other communities where people have very common clans. So I think that it's important to reach back for commonalities and move forward with empathy, I suppose. I mean, that sounds a little cliched, but we do move forward with empathy and remembrance of the warmth and love people had for each other. You want to move forward, move forward together with Ghalib, say. You know, set your eyes on Ghalib, and just look back at him anytime you're confused.
I love that ending. I have one question from the audience. This is Dr. Salat Negi, Dr. Malik, and he will ask you the question. Do you want to come here, sir?
Do I have to, or I can ask?
You can ask, but I don't know if your voice will carry.
No, voice is okay.
Voice is okay? Okay.
Okay, it's a beautiful point. Actually, I love it that art subverts the reality indicts the reality by living in it. That's a wonderful thing. And as you said, that this RSS phenomenon is not is the latest one, but I think if I see and go back into Gramscian thinking, I find that RSS and political Islam, they were both born in 1925, and gradually they penetrated culturally among the masses, and they took over when politics, when everything was perfect for them. So actually, they were slowly. It was a cancerous phenomenon. Starting from there, that time, 1925 onwards, because if we see those Hassan al-Banna and Madudis and all that, I mean, they all Akhwanul Muslimin type things. They all came there, and even RSS was born as a cultural thing. And that cultural phenomenon ultimately turned into political one, because nothing is beyond politics. Everything is politics. So my question is that RSS is not something new. It was coming gradually. It was penetrating in the society because of economic reasons, mostly due to economic reasons.
Usman, you want to comment on that? That the politicization of Islam, Hindu subjectivity, all actually has been cancerous for quite a bit of time pre-partition.
I am not a scholar. I don't have big major answers. All I can make out of my own comments and opinions. But when we say that RSS is not new, but we're talking about 1920s and 10s, in the eye of India, 5,000 years, what is 70, 80 years? Right? So, I mean, that's like a blink of an eye. So again, whether we think of the, rise of fascism and RSS, they happen pretty close together. While the injection of religion into politics is a very old phenomenon, it's certainly not new. Many people have done that for many different reasons, sometimes for positive reasons, sometimes for horrible reasons. But I think that the germination of such movements in fertile ground, the ground that was carefully prepped by colonialism, by the company first, and then by the British Raj itself, certainly, led to the eventual rise of fascist movements or religious radical movements. At the end of the day, I don't think there's any way to protect the world from such grim injections or realities. That has always happened. That will always happen. But again, for me, all I have read for the last 2 years is history, because once the genocide in Gaza started, I was not able to read fiction anymore. Fiction seemed hollow, especially white people fantasies about the lone survivor with a gun in his hand, whatever. Resistance just started seeming just a crass and a load of just BS. So all I've read is history, and so suddenly my eye with which I'm looking at my own work or other people's work has become pretty vast. So for me, these things just do seem like just a sudden phenomenon in the long canvas that is India and the long canvas that is the world. Or moving back, I'm also a student of science and I love science, the eye of the universe. So for me, I would like to look at these things and look at them as anomalies. And like Audrey Truschke says, she says as a historian, I'm very clear that these radical movements, their time is limited. And I think I agree with her. I do agree with her. I think that we think these things seem powerful and potent and omnipresent. I'm not sure. There is a Quran verse that I really like. Everything is perishing except for God's face. Wajiullah, everything is perishing except for God's face. So I think many things will perish, and it is our job to be a witness to those perishing and to cheer when they're done and to be humble when they're imposed on us.
I really like that. Thank you so much. We have another question from Dr. Farooq.
Not
You wanna-
a question, maybe a comment.
You want to come in?
Yeah, sure.
Please.
Assalamu alaikum, Usman Saab. Really good
Wa
to
alaikum
see
assalam.
you, and would love to read your work. Haven't done it so far, but definitely will do it. and really subscribe to your sort of emotions that you are presenting. It's very important. We need love, we need empathy to overcome these differences. But don't you think this glorification, or call whatever, this, idealization of the Indian past is really problematic, because BJP is doing the same as well. And on our side of the border, what we call Pakistan, it again, they, sort of use history. My own viewpoint is that, okay, you cannot, history goes with economy and mode of production as well. It was a different period before colonialism. It was feudal mode of production. The Hindu-Muslim problem, if ever it was there, it had different roots. It had feudal roots. The present roots of whatever enmity is there is rather different. This should be understood in the present global political economy. Anyway, coming back to the same question, don't you think this very glorification of history is problematic in itself? If you look at all the recent Bollywood productions, couple of books very courageously edited by my Indian friends, I contributed a chapter as well, where we look at this, historicals. एक जमाने में मुगल आजम बनती थी, अब वो क्या बन रही है, ये बन रही है. Thank you.
Dr. Saab, no problem at all. I think, I'm a physician, right? So I'm a rheumatologist. I treat very complicated autoimmune diseases. And part of the job that I have is to always, even in the face of chronic illness with very sick people, very, life-threatening conditions. Part of my job is to make sure that I'm always also approaching it from not just a clinically precise side, but a humane side. And if we don't do that, in Pakistan and India both, I think, I'm sure India mein hota hoga, but in Pakistan, half the battle, when my family members often say, just going to the doctor fixes half my problems, or worsens them. So I think that I would much rather glorify all the golden periods, the wonderful things about our mutual countries, about our land. I would rather find those stories that astonish me, that I absolutely am in awe of, you know, um, the wonderful things, and I would rather glorify them and be naive about them, be naive about the future, than be cynical, then be cool-eyed and cynical and think about it from a point of view of despair. Because I think, history has shown us this as well. Look at Gandhi himself, right? His non-violence movement. In some ways, what a naive idea to change the world with non-violence, right? But people, well, I mean, we saw the consequences and the fallout and the strength. So I do think there is power in these big ideas where the world could be something bigger than the sum of its parts. And I think I'll probably leave it off there.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Dr. Malik, there's some other questions that I will invite the audience to ask you. Please. Yes, please. If the voice won't carry, please.
Okay. Make it? Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, thank you. Firstly, I really like your idea of mixing horror fiction where we can read your work. Secondly, my question is not very philosophical. I have just very basic question. Like, do you after recent skirmishes and across the border polarization, do you see any kind of hope that we can have like people like you who see things in such a positive way? It was a delight to hear you, seriously.
I don't make any big predictions. I'm not an astrologer. I wish I were. It would be nice to read people's palms. But I will say this, that I think I'm confident enough to say this. Mark my words. Again, we should look at the long arc of history and how these things work out. Governments change, moments change, nation states needs change. The same skirmishes that we're talking about, give it a few years, see what happens. This is not the first time people have become enemies or friends. Alliances shift every 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 15 years. Why did we get colonized so quickly by the East India Company post the Battle of Plassey in 1757? What changed? Alliances would move within 1 year to 2 years to 3 years to 4 years. This is not new. There will be more alliances. Now I'm, being a little cool-eyed about this, but yes, I can pretty much guarantee you things will change. Give it time. This will happen. Maybe some, you know, God forbid there will be bloodshed. But yes, sometimes there unfortunately is bloodshed. There is unfortunately war, but these things do change. I am not unoptimistic about it. Um, yeah, I think that we are looking at, actually, I personally believe we're looking at a watershed moment for many, many reasons. But I do think that I see a lot of hope. I especially see hope in the young people always. They are almost always in the long run people who drive those changes and who can bring war and peace. But I see amazing, I mean, you should look at some of the younger science fiction writers in their 20s and teens and the way they think, both on every side. They are very smart people. They look at things way more than some of the old guard do.
We have one more question. There's one more question. Would you please come here, please?
I think the voice is going to carry, but I think you're a bit loud.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you guys, yes.
Yeah. So it's not specifically towards Usman, but anyone you in the panel can take it. But I was just listening to you guys, and I was wondering that is it possible to move beyond partition's legacy of trauma in this maybe distorted, but still it's a very interconnected and modern world. So any one of you can take it.
Usman, do you want to comment on that first?
Yeah, that is a very good question. I think it is absolutely possible. It's already happening. If the weaponization was not happening right now by governments, you would be seeing people already moving past partition. It is already happening. I think it is a mistake for people to think that a lot of younger people care about partition. Honestly, they don't. Those memories are long gone. The people who suffered are, my grandmother is from Amritsar. She took a train to Lahore from Amritsar. Those people are long gone. That thing is going away. It's just the weaponization that's the problem. So I do think it is possible to move beyond it. Now, should we completely move beyond the trauma and the horror and the wounding? Maybe not. Maybe we do need to keep that in mind as a moment of truth and as a historical memory to serve as lessons. But I honestly am much more hopeful than so many people are. And again, this is not just from me saying this, and maybe it is also not because of me saying this as a history student, but maybe also because I'm also a writer. Writers imagine alternate worlds, and why can't we? I mean, look at the current. I mean, I don't want to get too political, but look at the current governments around the world. Look at how clowns are running the world. Who could have imagined? Who could have imagined clowns running the world and us all despairing because clowns are running? Hey, you know what? Vote for clowns, find a circus. It's all right. It's part of the world. That's the Madho Jazare Kainat, right? It's all right. It will move back. We should all have hope. We should laugh at the clowns and we should move beyond the clowns. There is serious business to be had. Good business.
I really want to know what has to say here about this. That's one. Dr. Farooq, do you want to take that also? I really want to know what you have to. Do you want to about this?
Yeah, sure. Again, I agree with his Osman Saab's emotionality, but I do not agree anything he says about politics and history. It's a long debate. We can't finish it. The thing is, the clowns have a lot of power, and youth, the whole book I'm talking about is about reproduction of partition. Just what happened. Look, PTI, apparently the Pakistan, Imran Khan's party, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, was trying to be the most anti-military. During these 6 days of so-called skirmishes, or teen ya 4 din, whatever, the left on both sides, Pakistani left is very small. They were in India, CPI, CPM, they were supporting BJP. In Pakistan, Amar Ali Jan and Temur, all the guys you know on YouTube, they were supporting Pakistan military. I was holding my head in shame. Okay. So, I mean, we need to look at the political and most importantly, economic forces. Without building alternatives, without building a mass movement of reconciliation on both sides of the border, or 3 sides of the border. Now we have Bangladesh, don't forget it. And that won't happen in that part of the world either. It has to be built in Sweden, in USA, in Europe, in the USA most importantly. Okay, so that's my answer. And that's the struggle. Looks very big, but it's possible.
Can I quickly jump in though? I do have to say that I'm somewhere in between in this debate, because I see a lot of counter subcultures happening within the subcontinent in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. Even I have academic and non-academic friends in the Pashtun border areas who talk about alliances happening. So I don't think it's the responsibility of only diasporic subjectivities or third spaces that this kind of alliances are happening. It is happening. You know, we live in the belly of the beast. I mean, we all agree with that. But I do feel that despite the power, there are things not to, nobody can predict, but I do think there's something happening that I want to pay attention to through the resistances and the solidarities that are growing. And, it's a moment for me to rethink partition. The other book that I have contributed my work into is called Rethinking Indian Partition Histories, and where I talked about Khamosh Pani and, the kind of cinematic work that is also being produced in the larger culture industry that we all know Bollywood is, or the dominant hegemonical productions for both India, Pakistan, Bangladesh are happening. There are these spaces of growing subversions and transgressions. So to me, it is hopeful. And I want to rather look at hope than despair. But when we feed despair, more despair is begotten, I feel. And I think a space like this, where we have collected together, is a space for hope. I do agree that this is in a third space and a space in Sweden, but that this is possible despite certain skirmishes that happened throughout in the last 48 hours that some of us know about, is a space of hope and change. And that we could collect across boundaries, to me is fantastic. And I mean fantastic in a way, in the literal meaning of the word.
So I would add one thing in there.
Please.
A couple of things.
Please do.
One is that hope. Adorno said that hope is uneconomical, so it has gone obsolete. Those who holds the means of production, they holds the means of destruction. And those clowns we are talking about, they hold the means of destruction, and they can destroy us. Look at Israel, which stands nowhere in the world right now, but it is actually, it's a pariah state, or not even a state. It's a boundaryless state, but still it is mocking and it's committing genocide. So where is that resistance element really? Fine, Hamas is putting up resistance, and that's great. But the fact is that the entire world is watching, and West is supporting them. So holding the means of destruction and means of these things actually matter. They decide our death, how we have to die. So I don't see that they are clowns. They're not clowns. They have an agenda in their mind to maintain imperialism, to maintain hegemony, to maintain domination through direct domination. Now they don't talk about hegemony, indirect. They talk about domination, that look, we are going to destroy you. Here we are going to starve you. And what can we do really?
And yet the kind of global support that is now emerging for Gaza needs to be taken into consideration. people are there on the streets in millions across the world. And I want to say that even 5 to 10 years ago, people were not there for Gaza in the way that people are pouring in right now. To me, this is a moment of change and possibilities.
Except if you ask me as Ghazan, as a person of Gaza, I would say that no, it's not doing anything good for me. Your support or anyone's other support is not
We have
writing.
Wafa here from Gaza who can speak.
No,
Sorry, just one moment. I've lived 25 years in Sweden, a country, again, we live because of hope. Okay, hope is not the problem here. I read that novel, Cancer Ward. I subscribe to that. I hope all of you have read it. Wafa will speak about Gaza. She comes from there. This very country of Sweden, there have been 3 big causes post 1970: South Africa anti-apartheid, Palestine, when Palme was around, and तीसरी मुझे याद नहीं आ रही, but anyway, it's were big. And we have some Swedish friends here as well. Because of Islamophobia, because of the rise of neo-fascists that we call Swedish Democrats here, this movement has really gone down. Even the left party leader with an Iranian background took a very stupid position initially. And rest Wafa can perhaps tell much better than me.
I don't want to take specifically actually about Gaza, but you talk about something important about partition. And to refer to partition, because like what you have like post-trauma, you talk about 75 of separation, partition, and it's almost the same of time of Nakba in Palestine, which happened in 1948. But we cannot actually talk about partition without talking about colonialism.
Absolutely.
And which like caused this partition, which the main goal to this partition for people to move to whatever this power, like Donald Trump, I mean, like who's like, I decide to move people of Gaza outside because we want to do a resort there in Gaza. But yeah, Habibi, you have the semi-climate in California where you don't do this fucking resort for you in US instead. So we have to talk about the mentality of colonialism, which caused this partition. Because Palestinians, Pakistani, Hindu, whatever nationality, we didn't decide for ourselves. It was English mandate, English occupation, French, Belfer, since Belfer, and the aim, how they decided to divide land and which affected us as we third generation of Nakba, or you third generation of what happened in Pakistan, Kashmir, and how we divided these places for small cantons, and we just leave people empty. Why? So this is very important also to change. It's like we have something in common.
Absolutely.
Wherever Palestine, Kashmir, Pakistan, and we can do something. Maybe we don't have the weapon, but our weapon here in our brain.
Yeah.
And we can fight for this colonialism and to make our resilience, which is like we want to plant the love, peace.
I agree.
So thank you.
Thank you.
I add one more thing. Adorno was the leftist communist and the Jew, Zionist Jew, ultimately turned to Zionism. He categorically said that Auschwitz happened when they look at the slaughterhouse and say they are animals. And it is precisely happening over there. And Adorno was alive in 1962. He died in 63 somewhere. And he did not say a single word about that Auschwitz which was taking place right in Gaza.
Yeah,
So-
it's actually, this is what Netanyahu said in the beginning of the war. We wanted to create a human being animals. We will cut food,
Yes.
water, and electricity, everything. We will starve them. And me, myself, I'm naive, despite I'm coming from Palestine, I lived most of my life under occupation. I thought he's like crazy. He drive nuts actually and just throw this sentence. And basically what's happening after 2 years he starved people of Gaza. And what we did, what the all international community did to help people of Gaza, nothing. Okay, we demonstrate, we do things, wah, 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 wah. I mean, in the end of the day, they are starving.
I think one last question or two people have, Lisa and the lady at the back, and then we can end the discussion.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, please.
Maybe it's less of a question than kind of trying to sum up some things I've been thinking about. But thank you so much for your intervention. I've been thinking about how we can relate to this question or relate our conversation about partition to obviously what's going on in Gaza. And what strikes me is what you're saying is about who controls the narrative about history. And maybe the question is less, or the point is less about what really happened and getting the history right and focusing on history, as about how we as artists and scholars intervene in what kinds of histories are given credence. I mean, if I think about, I was in the US, my mom's from New York, and I spent a lot of my life in the US, and I was a sort of anti-Zionist, my mother's Jewish, from, high school. And I remember, like, when I first, read about it and just finding it absurd that nobody was talking about this, right? It's like you discover the wheel and you're like, hey, there was, the Nakba, and people are, like their eyes would glaze over. And sort of like, how is this possible that a certain version of history is the only one that's sayable? And then of course, we learn about the kind of the propaganda apparatus and how much money is behind it, and the way in which like there's been some pretty clear scholarship about this. But notwithstanding the fact that historians have done all this work, it doesn't matter. It's about how the narratives are shored up and circulated. And so thinking about, I'll just wrap up, but just thinking about this conversation today, I was thinking about even if there are progressive or different kinds of narratives that are circulating in India and in Pakistan, the question is how they circulate, how those other kinds of understandings of history encounter one another, and what kinds of ideas they engender. So I was thinking about this experience, like growing up in New York or, in the US, there's this thing that happens where you hang out with your Indian and your Pakistani friends together. And then at some point in the evening, after a drink, they start playing that game where somebody sings a line of the Bollywood song and then somebody has to, that one where yeah, thank you. And then like the rest of us are like lost, right? Because we don't know all those films. But it always struck me that there was this thing that would happen that was really kind of amazing, and everybody was all good friends, and like everybody knew about partition, and everybody's had their story. But and I was very used to it. And then a couple of years back during the pandemic, I'm an anthropologist, and I was coordinating. I'm a Mumbai anthropologist, and I was coordinating a project. It was a 3-city project, a Mumbai, Lahore, Colombo project, and I was the Mumbai investigator on the project. Now, obviously, it's hard to coordinate with where you're going to meet, right? Colombo. So there we all are in Colombo, right? Hanging out with Team Lahore, Team Mumbai, and Team Colombo. And we had all gotten on this bus to go out to some, retreat center to talk about infrastructure in these 3 cities and so on. And of course, an hour into the bus ride, guess what we start playing? Yes, right? And who's left out? The Colombo team, right? And what was so amazing is that the whole time after this, all of the participants of the Mumbai and Lahore team, none of whom had really spent much time abroad. So they were mostly based in Lahore. So this thing that I was so familiar with, where like people from Pakistan and India, when they hang out in New York, they're all like, but they were all profoundly affected by this experience of encountering and realizing they all know the same, and they knew that they all watched the same movies. But and this is where the affective part comes in, that art can do. We're actually experiencing, and like there was like a romance that happened, and and like this whole kind of, there's something. So I'm wondering, in relation to this question, how can we as artists based in Sweden or wherever we are kind of curate or give life to different kinds of political ideas that might come out of this, not only into India and Pakistan, which is a morass, but in terms of the whole global conversation about like, what are we doing here? I mean, how, like, here there's a genocide going on, and it's the terms in which we narrate our history which are at stake. And anyway, that's to me that the really profound thing.
I think that's a really beautiful way of summing everything up today. would you please have the last word behind you?
Oh, yes, thank you very much. My question is actually to all the scholars who are speaking there. But before that, you talked about Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka came into discussion, even Palestine. It's amazing that Afghanistan did not come into the discussion, which is so much linked with both in the colonial time, before colonial time, and in the post-colonial time.
Absolutely.
And Afghanistan today is a space where both Pakistan and India are doing proxy wars. They both want to
And the West.
and the West too, yes, and they all want to control this territory and the society there.
Yeah.
And then when we look at the way Pakistan and India are doing, and they are using history, and they are using it in a very post modernism framework, using that we say nothing is real and reality is socially constructed. So the way they see history, India is saying, well, India has a centuries old relationship with Afghanistan. And Pakistan said, wait a minute, what relationship? For centuries, invaders have been coming from Central Asia and through Afghanistan and invading India, and the Afghans have been participating in them, and some of the invaders were actually the Afghans. And then Pakistan is naming its missiles Abdali and Ghori and so on. So in this whole context, and coupled with the one that you also mentioned, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, I want to hear your thoughts on how do you see the future and the state boundaries. Do you think they will break, or could we arrive at something like EU, where the state boundaries exist, but people freely travel and there is massive economic, it's all kinds of relationship? Or do you think more states will emerge? So it's, I know somebody said we are not astrologists, of course, but your analysis, what is the future in terms of state boundaries?
Farooq, मैंने तो शादी अफगानिस्तान में की
तो आप हमारे साले हैं.
And I just want to quickly mention that, Mohammed Mohammed Farooq's work from Pashtun side, it's incredible. So I will give you the name of the work. He's talking about necropolitical Afghanistan. It's a newly emerging work that's coming up maybe at the end of this year. So please, definitely, that book is profoundly important. But
what is the name of the book?
Book is coming out. It's called Necropolitical Afghanistan, I think. But, the name has not come out by the publisher yet. But I know the book is coming up anytime this fall. Mohammed Farooq, and he is talking about Pashtun identities and the onslaught from all different kinds of imperialist conquest. But apart from that, I just worked on rethinking Rabindranath Tagore's Kabuliwala, because this profoundly important text that, is celebrated for cross-border alliances and this kind of coming together. And I am critiquing what it actually does is stereotyping the Pashtun identity as this idea of Kabuliwala. Who's the Kabuliwala? Is all Afghani subject of Kabuliwala? First, we know it's quite a huge reductiveness out there. And secondly, Tagore's implications of the Kabuliwala itself is problematic, because in the end, the Indian identity is heightened in its glorification, because the Kabuliwala is a murderer in the end who goes off to prison, right? So the history, what you said about Muhammad Ghori and, what happens, that, is kind of fetishized into this whole Mughal scheme, is so problematic. And Rabindranath Tagore is also not amiss from that kind of reduction. So we have to think of